Sure thing. Okay. So we're back. Everyone can hear me? We're all good? Sweet.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's see what we got. Hooks, part 2. I'm going to probably say this hooks was, I don't know, use state. Maybe it's not even part 1. There's a lot to hooks. I'm just going to change this. Use hooks, use effect. Those are the hooks that we're going to be using. Cool. So, all right. So today, I'm going to go over just the feedback here. Yeah. I'm going to just take a look at the feedback. I haven't taken a look at feedback in a while. Take me 2 minutes. Just want to review a little bit of the feedback. Then we'll go over the use state hook, which we covered Tuesday, and then we'll jump into the use effect hook, one of the many hooks, and then we'll wrap it up. We'll also take a look at maybe the projects, look over the final project, discuss ideas you might have. I know, Abner, I think you slacked about an API might not have the data that you're looking for. There may be a way for us to find an API.
I'm probably just going to make my own Google Sheet full of the data that I need.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, I can always, we never got around to doing the Google Sheets. I mean, it was just something I thought would be cool. It's not part of the curriculum, but we can always try to incorporate that maybe next class. Import a Google Sheet as an API, and then I'll shoot an article out on how to do it as well. Cool. Let's do this. Right. I am recording. Cool. Feedback. Right. Class 11, last class. So looks like just from the feedback, looks like things are going fairly well. I mean, once again, I can only make these conclusions based on who submits the feedback or how many, but from the feedback looks pretty solid. Some of the feedback, I felt like I had too much time during the lesson. I think maybe the lab. I think when I assigned the lab, 15 minutes turned into, some people were able to get it done like, 6 or 7 minutes, maybe even 10 minutes, and they had the extra time. So keep working on the bonuses. That's what I would suggest. You have the time in class, work on a bonus. Apply what you learned to the bonus. I appreciate going through the iterations of things like state. Helps to learn functionality and motive with the original versions to where we are now, right? So this progression of things and kind of always going back and reviewing. You're going to see everything that we've taught, you're going to see. You're going to go out there and I'm going to assume maybe even your company, if it's using React, isn't using hooks yet. That may be the case. And they might be like, we're not going to be using hooks. So using constructors, and super and saying this .8, that may be a common thing for you for a year until they say, hey, let's start writing in hooks. So you have to see all of it. Getting my groove with the code-alongs and labs now. Love it. Awesome. Once again, I try to incorporate the code-alongs. You can follow. You can watch. Trying not to go too fast. So you do have time. Sometimes maybe I am going a little fast, but you do have the solution. And please feel free to say, hey, Joe, can you just slow down? Can you review the thing that you just did? You can always copy and paste and get things to where you need to get them. And then I'm starting to wonder about alternative ways of organizing the files, since stuffing a bunch of unorganized files into component folders looks like it could get unmanageable. Yeah, it could. So when you start structuring your components folder, start creating subfolders like a folder called form. And form can have the form component and any child components that the form component might need. And so you can kind of aggregate those all, and you can have a form CSS file that also can be imported that's very specific to the form. Okay. Sweet. That's really it. Once again, not a lot of feedback, so I don't have a lot to go on, just what I see here. Cool. I'm just going to mute everybody. Awesome. So let's jump into it. Review state hook, right? The official reference lifecycle methods. All right. So I want to go into a little review of the useState hook and kind of bridge the gap between what we're going to be covering in a little bit, the useEffect hook and how that plays into what we're doing. Okay, so I do have here this little form. Let me see, is there anything here? It doesn't do much. Just outputs some text. So I'm actually going to open this up in another tab here. Okay, keep that open up. And we'll go here. All right. I'll select this out also. Let me just do that really quick. Get everyone slacked out. So here, I have two components. One's, so in index, let's take a step back. In index, I have a class counter component and a hooks counter component that's commented out. So what we're seeing right now is just one of those components, not both. They are going to be the same thing. We're just going to construct them differently. The whole, convert everything to a class-based component, I know it can be tedious at times. So I have this particular component here, right? Let me just zoom in a little bit. And one thing you'll notice, it's a class-based component. We have state up here. And then we have these life cycle methods. So this is a life cycle method, right? Life cycle method, okay? And this also is another life cycle method. And so when it comes to life cycle methods, I'm just gonna go here and take a look at the life cycle methods in React 16.4. And life cycle methods, we go through these phases. We go through a mounting phase, an updating phase, and an unmounting phase. So mounting is the first time the component loads, right? The application loads, boom, the components are there, or maybe most of them. Maybe something's not there because it's not active, so it hasn't been mounted yet. And during the mounting phase, we go through all of these life cycle methods. The constructor, which we don't really use anymore when we're coding along. Webpack and Babel take care of that for us. There's this get derived state from props, a render, which we are used to using, right? Render is something. And then a component did mount. And the component did mount, as we know, is used predominantly for at least what we've used it for making API calls, right? That's predominantly what we've been using it for. Now, when we do update something, we've been updating state quite a bit. Updating state causes an updating phase, okay? And when things are updated, there's you can either evaluate props that have been updated, whether the component itself sets state, whether we call this force update method. And then it goes through some of the identical methods like render right here. I mean, get derived state from props, should component update. Then there's a render once again. Then there's a get snapshot, and then DOMs and refs. And then the last big one, the component did update. Okay, and then component will mount. These are the predominant methods that we would stay focused on when learning React from the ground up. These are the predominant ones that you'll work with. These other ones have their purpose in place, but they're much more niche in when you would use them. Okay, so component did mount, we know when we use it. Component did update, I don't know, when would we use that, right? We haven't used it. So I'm just gonna demo component did update and its context, because both of those play into part when we get to useEffect, okay? So when I go back here I see there's component did mount and component did update. Okay, and so if I go here and I just go to the console, right, and I click on here, boop, look, component did update. Now I'm going to refresh the page. Let's see what happens. I should get, oh, I should have got a component did mount. Now, why did that not happen? Component.
Yeah, I think there's a typo.
Oh, here in component did mount. Did I?
There's two P's.
Oh, yeah, there's 2 P's. That's one. Okay, that'll stop it. Thanks, Megan. All right. So when I update, I see component did mount. Okay. Now when I update, when I click on this button, let's just assume clicking on this button adds the number here, right? Click 1 times, click 2 times, click 3 times. And what you'll see is inside component did update. Now, component did mount only ran once. Most of the time when we're doing that, we use component did mount for the sake of making the API call. And then we have component did update. If it's there, right? We don't always have this thing there, but if it's there, we use it as part of this updating phase. Is there something that we want to do when it gets updated? And component did update also takes in previous props and the previous state. So you have the ability to compare those things and see if they've changed in any sort of way, and maybe to determine if a component should be updated. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to review these. These are going to be more so when we get into useEffect. Okay, just want to explain why they're here and why we see those. Now, I'm going to go to the hooks. Now, so what we want to do is kind of work this magic. What we just did here, where I'm able to click on here and type. So if I was to go back here and just type in here name, we know that name's being updated, and you see component did update is being updated again. So not only are the clicks for clicking the button, but also for typing. Anything that updates state will kick off component did update. All right. So I'm going to go to the hooks counter, and what we want to do is just do a quick review of what's happening with using useState. Okay, so I've imported useState here. Now I have a handle click button, so when I click on this button, it should change to be the number of clicks. So importing or using useState, we need to create a variable or variables that are going to store state. Now I'm going to call this count and set count. Okay, and that's going to equal use state, and I'm going to set the default value of count to 0. Okay, so whatever the value is that you assign in use state is the value that is assigned to the first element in this array. Okay, because use state returns back an array, and this is our way of doing array destructuring, right? So this is array destructuring versus object destructuring, right? Doing very similar things, except array destructuring does it based on the position of those elements in this returned array. So I have const count, const set count, and what we want to do is if I was to click on the button here, we would just then call set count, right? If I call set count, all I have to do is grab count and +1. It's really all I have to do. And by doing that and changing this so that we could see it, right, with one N, this count number of times should update, right? So it is updating. Awesome. If we wanted to also have a input field here as well, we could add a const, and we could say name, set name, and that's going to be equal to a use state again, and this time I'll just give it empty string. Won't be any strings here. And actually, you know what? I'm going to go here because we were still using the class counter, so I'm going to use the hooks counter now. we weren't even using the hooks counter. So I'm going to make sure that the hooks counter works. Awesome. Okay. So in here, I'm going to go ahead. Is this, just let me make sure it is part of it. Okay. So I'm going to go in here, add an input. And for the input, we will give it a on change event because we want to capture when you're typing. We want to capture every keystroke and update that. And so on change, we'll call handle change, right? That doesn't exist yet, so we need to create it. And we need to add a value. What's that value going to be? Whatever's inside of name, okay? So I'm going to go here and create the const handle change method, okay? Why is this out? Because I didn't close it, okay. And in here, we would just set name, right, equal to, I'm going to put the E in there, e.target.value, okay? It's e.target.value. And if we were to update this thing now and just do whatever name, we'd see that it captured it, it updates state, and then it goes down here and puts that value back in. So in our class counter, we had state as one thing, right, as an object with these two separate key value pairs. And when we migrated over to hooks, we split those up into their own individual unique state elements, we could say, okay? And so in essence, that pretty much is really like state or the use state, right? I think it's maybe easier to use than creating the class-based component. This is kind of how I opt to go now when I'm building out components versus the older way. So how do we feel about that? Any questions? Is there anything that needs to be clarified, right? Okay, sounds good. Just want to make sure. Okay. So D3 I want to point out, yeah, I'm just going to bring this up really quickly. This is one of the reasons why the component did update method is used. I'm not going to go into depth with this, but I know some have been interested in D3 and React. And so this is just a D3 bar chart that allows you to add elements and remove elements, right? It's got some like nice animation in there. Once the thing loads, it loads, all of these values are then added. And once again, we can add elements and those bars then adjust their width based on scales. I'm not going to get into all that, but you can see here there's a component, class, chart, extends React component, constructor props, the old way of doing it. It's been a while since I built this. And then here, I'm just going to go here real quick, the mounting and updating phase. Component did mount calls this .render chart, right? And we know that did mount happens after something has mounted, and component did update happens after state has been updated, okay? And they both call the same thing. And the reason why, and there's multiple ways to write or incorporate D3 into React. There's at least 4 different ways. This way is the most, I would say, basic way of doing it. If you know D3, you could either like copy and paste stuff with a few subtle changes. You could get a bar chart, line chart, whatever chart you want with D3 up and running. So we see that, we're getting data here because when we render the chart, this .state.data set has been updated. I'm going to go past all this linear stuff here. I'm going down to, let me see where I'm going. I'm actually going to go to where things get rendered right here. So I want you to see that in the SVG, because that's what D3 does to create these bar charts. It uses scalable vector graphics like Canvas. If anybody's worked with Canvas before, it's the same thing, or if you worked with SVGs. And we've created a ref. This is the old way of doing it. Once again, when I built this out like a year ago, this was the old way of doing it. But a ref that grabs this particular node, okay? And now that I have a handle on the node, okay? When I go to update, I'm just going to go to where the node is right here. This is the node. So I select this dot chart. When I grab the chart, I can manipulate everything inside of the chart. So in essence, D3 is really manipulating the data on the screen, not so much React. React doesn't control the individual bar itself. D3 is controlling it, which, you know, isn't, I suppose, best practices, right? You'd want React to control everything on the page. React should create the bar chart, and then it should append the bar chart. Here, D3 is doing that all. This is a very primitive way of doing it. I'm just showing you that once the data has been updated, once I click on add, by clicking on add, should push something into, let me just see if I have the add methods here. Yeah, handle add. Okay, adds to the data set, right? Spread operator, it adds a new object to the data set that updates state as part of the last method that runs component did update, which means state would have the new value. When state has that new value, oh, right here, we can then run component did update and update the chart. Okay, this is just one use case for it. I don't really have a lot of use cases for component did update, but when I'm working with D3, this is one of those use cases where we need to wait for component did mount so that we could get, I'm just going to browse back down, we could get this reference. You see this reference? So I could get that reference first. It renders, right? If I go back here, renders, which elevates or creates that reference. Then component did mount can run, and D3 can then grab that reference, right? If the reference wasn't there, D3 would have nothing to grab. So we grab that reference after render has created the reference point. Then component did mount can execute D3, and it can do its thing, okay? So I just wanted to show you the context there with the handle, the component did update, and the component did mount and update. So you have an idea. If you are, I know a few of you have reached out about D3. I'll definitely shoot out materials to you, some of the stuff that I put together. I mean, this particular one, I don't think I slacked it out. I'm surprised no one asked to slack it out. Anyone slack it? No? All right. That's a code pen. That's how I was teaching that particular class. But I have tons of other D3 specific material. So I can always kind of walk you through if you have an idea. Okay, just reach out to me. All right. So there we go. All right. Now we're going to move on to useEffect. Okay. And the reason why I kind of spent that time reviewing component did update and component did mount was because useEffect essentially, if we go to the online reference for, say, useEffect, useEffect is going to run basically those particular methods. I'm just looking to see here. Component did mount and component did update. useEffect is going to allow us to call those particular lifecycle methods. Now, those lifecycle methods are only available, so if I go back to our class, a class-based component. So these lifecycle methods are only available inside of a class-based component. They are not available inside of a functional component. So in the past, when we made decisions on whether we wanted something to be class-based or functional, we made that decision based on, does it need to do anything else but render HTML or JSX? If it needs to do something else, then there's quite possibly the need to turn it into a class-based component. First requirement would be state. If it needs state, it's got to be a class-based component. The second requirement would have been, does it need to run any of those lifecycle methods? If it does, then it has to be a class-based component. Now that we've kind of like merged a functional component and a class-based component, and we've created this new component that allows us to leverage state, right, using useState. We can also run these types of methods in something called useEffect, okay? And by doing that, we can simulate component did mount. Simulate what it would be like for an element to do something when it mounted for the first time, and then simulate something where it updated, okay? Now, like I said, with these two, if I go back here and we click, oh, is this not it? Let me see. Are we doing hooks counter, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna comment that out. Just wanna get that functionality back again. So I'm gonna go here, if I click on this, we see inside component did update. We got one component inside component did mount and several component did updates. And every time I type here, right, it updates. Okay, so I don't want to have to do that. Okay, now when you're using class-based components, I can stop component did update from updating. I can tell it not to update if I use conditional logic here. I could say if prev state dot count, right, is not equal to this dot state dot count. If it's not equal to that, then we're going to run this, okay? Only if it's not, okay? So we can force this thing now to not update all the time, okay? But only target specific things to update in reaction to. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to refresh, make sure I don't have any errors here. And I'm going to click on here. Boom. Component did update, right? And it's updating because I'm clicking. But what if I type? Do you see how this doesn't update anymore? It doesn't update because component didn't update has been configured not to update in reaction to anything else but count being changed, okay? So that's important. This was how we would have done it in the past in order to force something not to update, but based on a specific condition, okay? In hooks, we have something else now to use. So I'm gonna go back here and comment out class counter and add our hooks counter back, okay? So I'm gonna go back to our hooks. So in here, we have our two methods here, right? I'm going to import the hooks, the useEffect hook. So I'm going to say useEffect. Okay, so we're importing that hook, and now we have access to use that hook. So let's use the hook. When we do, we just call useEffect. It's a little different than useState, right? useState was storing things in a variable. This is more like a method, right? So state previously was an object, so it was kind of like a variable that would store things. But useEffect is more like a method. So we're going to kind of define it like a method. So when we do, it takes a callback, and this is useEffect. Okay. Now, useEffect in this construct, useEffect like this is similar to is really component did update. Okay. So in this context, this is going to be component did update. Now, how do we know that? Well, I am going to take, I'll just copy one of these inside. You know what? We'll just do this. Console log inside useEffect. Okay, so the fact that I'm in useEffect, the fact that I have two things in state, let's take a look. I'm going to go back here, refresh the page, get rid of any of those errors. Okay, so I'll refresh one more time. Now look, we should see useEffect inside useEffect. Okay, so it almost also acts as a, let me go back here too. useEffect like this, it's really component did mount. I'm going to put here component did mount and component did update. Okay, it's kind of acting like both. Well, why is it both? Because when I started up the component, right, I loaded it up, it ran once. Okay, now if I click, it runs again. It runs every time I click. And if I go here and start typing something, it also runs, right? So now it's running at the same time, doing what component did update was doing before. So we don't necessarily want that to be the case. Now, the thing with component, the thing with useEffect is this. It will run at least one time, right? Because it is a combination of both component did mount and component did update. So it will run at least once when the component is mounted, okay? There's no way to stop that, right? It's gonna run because that's what useEffect is. It's a combination of both of these separate lifecycle methods. Now, but what if we don't want it to run? What if we want to do something similar to, in the class component, we wanted to do something like this. We don't want it to run on every state change. We want to target very specific states in which to run. Okay, well, this particular hook gives us something to work with in order to do that. This hook takes in a second parameter. Okay, so this particular one, right, that's like, it's taking in the callback. This is the callback. That's the first parameter. Okay, so I'll put here first param is a callback, right? And a callback is just this anonymous function that we're creating, right? Which is an anonymous function, right? And then we run our code that we want to run inside the anonymous function. And the second param is an array. So let me add the array. Go here, comma, because it's a second param. That's a second argument. I'm going to put in an array. Okay, sweet. I put in an array. Let's see what the effect of that array is. Go back here. I'll update. We should get at least one inside useEffect. Awesome. I'm going to click. Oh, man, look. No more. It's not working anymore, right? It's stopped running. It's only running one time. And so the one time is more like a component did mount. It mounted. I'm going to run it, and that's it. Doesn't matter if I type in here. It never reruns itself. Okay. Now we can configure it to run on an update if we tell it which specific state variables to monitor. And we can just do that by putting in count. If we put in here the variable or variables that we want to be monitoring for changes to state, we can then tell useEffect to execute those same things. Okay, so let's say we did this. I go back here. I'm just going to refresh one more time. Inside useEffect, that's a component did mount feeling. Now, if I go in here and I type, nothing happens. Inside useEffect does not execute at all. But if I click on this, boom, inside useEffect. See it? See it moving? So we're forcing it to update itself at this point in time. If I wanted both count and name to execute when they were updated, I would just include name here. And now I'm able to make that change as well. useEffect, that's our component did update. If I type in here, look at that. We're at 5. Now we're at 6, 7, 8. Doesn't matter. Okay? That is our useEffect hook. Once again, we predominantly use it for the component did mount. And that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to go back, and I'm going to use it to make an API call. This is just kind of the pre-demo demo, where I'm just using it to show you how it gets used here in context to the component did update and the component did mount. So you know when somebody is talking about those methods, what they reflect, what they are trying to do. So when I say I'm going to use useEffect, you know that it can be configured for both of these. We can even go ahead and configure it for a component will unmount also. Okay? These are enough, though. We don't really have to go through the whole, every particular life cycle. There's a lot. Cool. How are we feeling about that? Pretty good, right? Nothing too crazy. All right. So I'm going to go here, and what I want to do is for us to do this. I'm going to select this out, back to our amazing color switcher. Okay. Select this out. Boom, boom. Okay. Here's our color switcher again. The color switcher never ceases to fail. Like everyone at GA knows. When I talk to my co-instructors or any of the instructors, they're like, so how do you teach React? And I'm like, color switcher. Come on. You can just walk up, and as long as you got color switcher down, you can do everything, almost everything. That and a to-do list, and boom, you can cover everything. All right. So the one thing that this color switcher does as of right now, and we've configured it for use state in the last class, is, you know, I could put pink in here, hit enter, and I get the color pink, and I can click on these colors, and they update the background color, right? That's something that was enabled. Finally, we have a color switcher that switches colors. That's pretty kick-ass. Now, I also added, you know, this subtle ability to double-click on it to remove elements as well. So I have a handle remove color. Now, I just want to ask the question. Based on this code, if I remove a color, the background color should change to white. Can anyone just take a moment, look at the code, and tell me how I would fix it? How would I, by default, when I double click on it and the color's no longer there, the background color should default to white?
When you're using return data not equal to color, in that same thing, you also have to change, you have to incorporate that the background color will go to white.
How do I do that? I mean, I put a little note in there, Gustavo.
As white.
What's that?
Set active color as your function that will do that for you, and then you have to pass in the word white.
Bingo. I could pass in white, or I could just not pass in anything, okay? Because when you do set this color, if there's nothing there, if the background color has nothing, like if I was, let me just open this up. If I was to just take a look at main here, right? Main doesn't have a background color now, but if I did go here and I gave it green, you say, would it? Oh, here, I gotta do this. See how it has green, but if I double click, whoop, background color disappears, right? Because there's no background color, so it just removes it, I suppose. If it's an empty thing, just, I guess it doesn't keep it. So sweet. I just wanted to make sure. You could put that together by looking up here and seeing the things, like these are the two pieces of state that I had. And I did this kind of to add a second piece of state to pass that down. That's really why I did this, so we could double up on this and demo what it would be like to have that. But it's a cool functionality, right? The ability to like click on something, remove the color, add a color. So if I do pink, when I add the color, I should also, on handle submit, I should also do the same thing. I should add this and then give it color. So when you do add a color, well, I really think it should change the background. That kind of makes sense. You just added it, make it change, make it go away. Awesome. So get rid of this. We don't need that. All right. So I have this API. And this is, once again, is predominantly where we're going to be using component did mount and our useEffect. And is anyone interested when they build out their app, just like a hands up, are you looking to use an API to pull in data? Yeah, looks good. Pull an API, okay. You know, that's really what makes an application exciting, right? You're pulling in data, and then you can filter the data, you can create things from the data, and I will walk everyone through doing the Google Sheets, maybe next class. Maybe I'll do that next with the colors. I'll put them into colors and we can import them. It just takes a little bit of like getting through the object. It's a little bit convoluted. I didn't really want to spend that time today doing it. So I have this. I'm going to go to that API. Oh, what happened? Here we go. Is it this? Oh, that's crazy. This thing was just working before. All right, HTTPS, is it? I gotta be honest, this thing was just working. Huh, let me see. Oh man, I can't believe, you know, the one time you wanna use this thing, it doesn't work.
Looks like it's expecting a path because the root path doesn't look like it works.
Yeah, it's really, let me see. This is the API, I've used it before. This is where I'm pulling it from. So I'm gonna see, maybe this random color thing works here. If this one works, then it should work. Unless like the Heroku, all right, so there we go. That works, and I get one color, awesome. And then I could pull in all colors if I want. There's one down here, I could pull this right here. See all colors? If I want, I could pull 200 colors. So if I take this and I do the same thing, so we have two APIs to work with. I could pull one random color and add it, or I could pull a bunch of colors and add that, right? So, you know what, maybe I'll just do the random color. So I don't have 200 colors there. There's a lot of colors. So maybe I'll just add a random color. That'll be fun. We won't know what color we're getting. Be exciting. All right. Maroon. Is it always going to be maroon? Maroon? No. Gainsborough. All right. Awesome. So I'm going to go back here. Now we want to simulate the component did mount because I want when this thing loads to grab a new color, right? That's the goal. So where would we do that? Well, first I would go up here, useEffect, right? I need to incorporate the useEffect method to simulate the component did update functionality. And here I would say useEffect. First parameter is the anonymous function, right? The callback. And then the second parameter would be an empty array if we want to simulate solely component did mount. Okay, so writing it like this with an empty array is component did mount. That's it. It will only run once. So
component did mount is only for classes, right? There's no component did mount. Okay.
So if I have this, yeah, component did mount and component did update are class-based methods, as well as all of these. See all these methods here? All of these things, those are methods, and they are all class-based. You don't get any of that stuff in a functional component. You never have render in a functional component. You only have return, right? So on Tuesday when we were doing all of our refactoring from class-based to functional, you had to delete the render method because a functional component does not have a render method, okay? It does not have a constructor. It does not have set state. You can't use that, okay? So I'm here, I'm in useEffect, right? And we want to make an API call, right? Okay, so how are we going to make this API call? Well, I'm first just going to make sure this thing works, right? Console.log, let's just make sure. Inside useEffect. First thing is like, before I try to make sense of anything and make sure, I'm going to update it and boom, inside useEffect. Sweet, I know it works, right? Adding a color, right? Adding pink. Didn't kick off useEffect, right? If I did not have that, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get rid of these console logs, like this handle remove color. Let me get rid of these. Handle submit. I'm gonna get rid of them. I don't want to keep seeing all these prompts. It's gonna drive me crazy. So I'm gonna go back here, and I'm going to just update this to remove that, so we can see that if I left it, we have one update, and then if I add another color inside useEffect, right? That ran one more time. Any other colors, I click on a button inside useEffect, change the background color inside useEffect. I don't really want that to keep happening. So I would add the array there, and that would stop that from happening. Okay? Where's the other console log? Must be coming from like one of these. Just looking where I can turn that console log off. Is it? Probably the form right here. Boom. I'm just getting tired of seeing all those console logs. All right, make sure they're gone. All right, here we go. Pink, boom, boom. No more inside useEffect. It stopped running. Awesome. What we want to do though, right, is we want to have that run, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to make an API call, right? So we did learn that we could use fetch to make an API call, right? So I could say fetch, what's the URL? Let me go back here, grab a random color, grab that, right? Select that out too. Make sure anybody wants to grab the random color, and I put the URL in there. Awesome. This returns a promise, and we would have needed to do something like this then, right? Because it returns a promise. This is the response. The response needs to be converted into JSON, and then we have access to the data. Okay, so then I could probably say, I don't know, color, because that's really what we're getting, right? And I would then have to do set colors array, right? Well, just like we did here, right? This colors array removed it. Which one handled the submit, right? This is how we added a color. We gave it an array because it's going to overwrite the previous array. We extrapolated or spread out through previous colors, and then we grabbed the particular color. Now, I also know, let's do this, that, I'm going to do this, but color is, if we take a look, is an object. So I essentially need to grab the string Gainsborough, whatever color's returned. Otherwise, it's going to break my code because the data that I am importing is just strings of text, right? So I have to make sure that I do that. So I could probably say, we probably could do color.color maybe, because that's what's going back, right? Color.color. That should work.
So
no.
You misspelled then.
Oh, yeah. That'll break it. All right. So here we go, right? That should work. Okay. And now we got the random color, right? So I go here and I refresh. We'll always get this random color every time, right? Awesome. Easy enough, right? So getting a color is fairly easy. It's not too hard to go ahead and grab a color, but does anyone recall a more efficient way of doing this?
Async and await.
Async and await, right? Okay. Maybe. So let's do that. Okay. So if I had to do async and await here, I would turn the function that is going to be an async and await function. I would use the async keyword, right? I'm already getting like what looks like it's screaming at me. Let me just see. All right. I mean, it seems like it's working, but an effect function must not return anything besides a function, which is the cleanup function. Huh. Okay. Something about this promise. I mean, it kind of looks like it's working, even though I just added the async. I mean, this code is working inside. So the idea here would be if this was an async function and we wanted to continue working with this, we could say maybe like let's color equal to await, right? This should get the data, right? Or I'm going to actually say here, this is the JSON. So this is JSON data. And then I'm going to get rid of this and say let color, maybe let data equal to await JSON, JSON.json, right? I feel like using JSON twice. I'm going to do this. Data. I don't like to double up on the names. It just drives me crazy. Okay. Oh, what happens here? Data. Oh, because I can't have data. This is going to be our JSON. All right. So now I have it. Okay. Or maybe we'll call this, you know what? I'll call this color. You know, a little confusing. All right. I don't need this anymore. I don't need that. We should be able to set the color now based on that, right? So color would be that. I'll get the color. We have the color. I refresh the page. I have what will be, but I still have this message. Like, I'm not really keen on this warning. So essentially, you can't or shouldn't, it is warning us, we should not be using async as part of the useEffect method itself. We shouldn't be using directly on it. Okay, what we should be doing is creating our own function that would make the call. So in here, we'd probably want to do something like let's make API call equal to an async function, right? Async, gotta spell it right. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this async here. But basically what I'm doing is I'm creating my own little async function, okay? And I am going to take these two and I'm gonna put them inside of there, okay? So this function should run, and when that function runs, it should then update that, right? And I'm inside my useEffect, right? I'm just gonna put that at the very top so we know that we're inside of there. And what would I need to do now? Any ideas? I'm not getting the call. Am I getting any errors? I'm going to get rid of this and just see, did the errors go away? Errors are gone away, but I don't have that thing. What's the most basic thing that I need to do?
The set colors array is in the wrong. Is it matter the fact that it's not defined inside the make API call function?
Colors array is accessible from here, and set colors is accessible because we have access to it globally. But I'm not getting any errors either, Gustavo. So quite positive. React is really unforgiving. Like if it doesn't have access to a variable, it like screams and like, ah. If I was like a variable 1, oh, didn't scream as loud. Thought it was going to scream at me really bad. Let me see. Oh, but you know why? Because I didn't call the thing. That's why. It's the thing that I'm looking for you to answer. Who can answer that? It's probably the most.
You just said it, but you didn't call the method or the.
Yeah,
the
I didn't call it. Yeah, okay. I was waiting for like the most obvious thing for everyone to be like, I guess you didn't call it. I don't know. API call. API call. Okay, we still have to call the thing. Now we have it. Now there's no errors. If I go back here and I refresh, I'll just have a random color added. Once again, we can add colors that we want. We can change colors. I can remove the random color. It doesn't really matter. But this is how we would do it, okay? Using the useEffect allows us to make this API call and get a random color, okay? Sweet.
Joe,
How are we feeling?
can you use useEffect like several times? So this time we had like an empty array, so this is a component now. Can we use it again? You would literally write useEffect again for update?
I don't know, because you would tell it this useEffect method is essentially the combination of those two previous methods. And if you decided you wanted to do the update, you would have to go in here and add the key that you want it to run only on update. So if we only wanted this thing to run if active color, say active color changes. Hey, active color. If active color, right? If active color changes, this active color, right? I did spell it right. I almost feel like it should, look, makes the API call. So we have to tell it which piece of state we want to monitor in order for it to make the decision whether it acts like a component did mount, running once only, or a component did update, running every time the thing updates. Okay.
But if you don't give it anything, it does both, right?
If I don't give anything here, an empty array, so I'll be very specific here. An empty array forces it to be component did mount. Okay.
Yeah, but when you first showed us this, you showed us that useEffect works on both mount and update.
It does, and if this array, if I remove this array, okay, no array means it is component did update and component did mount and component did update. It's both of them.
And you could do something in here where you could do like a conditional logic where if initial state is 0, then only treat it as mount. And
Sure.
then at the end of that, you change the initial state to a different number, and then you can create a effect that does it on update after that.
Yeah. Now, once again, like if we were just to take a look back at what we had done here, in the previous one, we needed to run some logic in component did update to tell it what not to run against and what to run against, right? That logic is still required here. We didn't free ourselves from doing this, okay? So here we'd have to tell it without, we're adding, look, it's crazy. It just keeps, I think it's looping right now. Oh, you know why it's looping?
It's you're
It's
adding.
an infinite loop now. Do you see this? So we're in an infinite loop because this thing, every time it runs, it calls the API, it updates state, it calls useEffect, it updates state, it calls useEffect, it updates state. We're in a perpetual, non-stop updating state, updating useEffect mode, okay? So I'm kind of glad that happened because that's the last thing you're going to want your app to do, right? To keep going, getting the data over and over and over again. So here, the way to stop that is to put the empty array, okay? And then it won't, and it will only update if we tell it to do it and based on a condition, okay? And it would be here that we would say that condition. So I could say active color, and then anytime we have an active color, it would then go. Like, crazy way of doing it. I probably wouldn't do that with active color, but sweet. How are we feeling about that? useEffect feeling good? Feeling the useEffect. All right, how about we take our break? You know, we'll take a 10-minute break today. I think when I said 5 minutes last time, everyone took a 10-minute break anyway. So I think I've conditioned everyone to take a 10-minute break. So I won't take that away. 10:58, 8:58. So come back at 9:08. Come back at 9:08. Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay, we're back. Can you hear me? Everyone good? Yeah? Okay. Sweet. So now it's your turn. All right. So the lab is going to be this. Now, I'm kind of leaving it a little bit open in regards to whatever design. I'm not really concerned with the design of the app, but what I want to do is make sure, especially since we're coming up to starting to work on your projects, right? The fact that you need to work on your projects, you're going to have to build the thing out. It's not like maybe what I built in the past, if you're going to like run with a to-do list or a color switcher. But if not, you're going to have to figure out components. You're going to have to figure out structure. So what I want you to do, I'll select this out. Actually, you know what? Hold up. I am going to fork this one. So I'll have the original starter code. So I know some people like the starter code. And let me select this out. All right. So the lab is going to be, you're going to import useState, useEffect. You're going to define your state. You know, you decide what you want to do. You decide what you want to call it. I'm not telling you what to call it. You make that decision. You create a useEffect hook that will use the URL below and grab data and set state. And then you're going to render that data in any way you want. And you need at least one additional child component. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you the URL is this URL. So let's take a look at this URL. Okay? They're the most active stocks. Now, this particular URL is being used in this final project. Okay, this person's final project decided to incorporate that just to give you ideas on how you could leverage it. So check out the most active stocks today, and that's how they designed it, right? I'm not asking like the additional time that you might have. Maybe you add it to your design. How would you design it? How would you make it look? How do you make something look like this? You know, you could add React Router, like however you want to go with it. Fundamentally, I want you to understand that all of that data is being pulled, okay, all of it. And you have the URL there, and then you have to go and pull that data. Now, once again, the data, once it's pulled, looks like this. You can make it look like the stocks project that we did work on. Remember we worked on iStocks? You can make it look like that. You can go back to iStocks and kind of emulate that if you want. But that's really what I want. I'm trying to leave it open so that you have to create more things all on your own versus like, here's the thing, and all you got to do is make a slight change. And this lab, I'm setting to be about 40 minutes because I want to give you quite a bit of time on it. I am going to leave it open also. I was going to post out a poll and just let me know if you do want. I will put you in because maybe it's a big project and maybe you're like, I don't know, I could use some help. So I'm just going to say here, if you want to work in a pair, click on the pair and I'll pair you up when I create the breakout room. I know a few of you as part of the company, I'll pair you up again like I've been doing in the past. Outside of that, if you want to work solo, you'll be solo. So you say solo, you're solo. If you decide like I'd like to connect with somebody just to help out, I'll put you in another breakout room with someone. Okay? It's like predominantly solo. Okay. Any questions on what you need to do? What kind of the requirements? Going once, going twice. Okay. I mean, I'm going to be here. Yeah. Joey, I'm going to pair you up with Steven. You guys are working together, right? And Gene, I would have paired you up with Demola, but I think he was coming in and out today. John, I'm sorry. All right. So let me create the breakout rooms, and we'll get started. Breakout rooms. All right, create the brand. I'm gonna make, hold on, I'm gonna make Abdul our co-host and create the breakout rooms. And let me just rearrange just one or two people here. Jim, let's do that. All right, Joey, move to room 4. Looks good, looks good. All right, I'm gonna open all the rooms. Well, before I do that, I'm just gonna put the click on thumbs up when done. Thumbs up when done. Okay. Here we go. Opening up all the rooms. You're off. You're off to the races. I'll be here. You need some help, just Slack us. Me and Abdul will be here to jump in. I'm recording. Okay. Sweet. Okay. A few on the harder side, some on the easier side. Okay. So let's take a look at some of the solutions. Let me share my screen, right? I'm not sharing my screen. Okay. So I asked for a few solutions. So let's take a look at some of the solutions we got here. This was Ramona's solution, right? Ramona, okay. Let's take a look. You want to talk to it, Ramona?
Sure. Yeah, so I kept it pretty simple. I just set up one piece of state with use state, which was the list of active stocks.
Mm-hmm.
So inside of useEffect, I kicked off the API call using async await and just grabbed the most active stock node from the JSON and set that as my stocks. And then I have 2 different components inside of the components directory. One of them is the stock list. So I'm passing my stocks through as props there. And this just sets up a table. There's one table row at the top that has the headers like company name and ticker and that sort of thing. And then there's this map at the top, which maps all of the stocks in a list through to a stock component. And I'm passing the stock through as a prop to that. And then inside of there, I'm just rendering the table row using the different fields on the stock.
Sweet. Yeah, it kind of looks similar to the actual design, the student's design. Great.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's take a look at another one here. We get a few more. I got Abner. Abner. Okay. All right, Abner's. I'm going to take a look at Abner's here, and we'll take a look at Gustavo's too. All right. So cool. Nice. Some added design there, Abner. That's nice. You design all that on the fly?
Yeah, that's just me doing, I was just trying to add stuff.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Okay. Walk us through here. I see index is just, you moved everything into app here. So here's our app. You want to walk us through it?
Yeah, I just like having an app as its own separate component instead of being inside index,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's going to be a little bit more complex. So there's a state with the active stocks, and that I used useEffects I used useEffect to call the API, making sure that it only gets called once on mount using the empty array. Then it just renders the header and the stocks list with the active stocks after putting it inside. So the stocks list, at the top, you'll see that I just iterate over the passed in stocks to create a stock component, that's just going to render a table row. And the table row contains the company name, the price, and the change. And then within stock It's just rendering each row, and it has a little bit of styling as well. The styling is actually all done inside styles.css. I didn't, except for the color of the change column.
Sweet. That's awesome. It's almost like you and Ramona were thinking
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Approaching it the same way.
Even the names are the
same. Work
same.
together on it.
Even the names were the same, so I was really confused. I was like, that's very weird.
Yeah. So it does look like, when you, so one of the things like making the API call. So you make the API call, obviously return is running here, but you're making the API call, you're updating state, and then you pass the stocks down. The stocks are passed down here and you loop over it. And then if they exist, you would have them, right? So I'm just going to say, what if I put a snag here? I just want to see with the app error out, and it looks like the app would error out if something broke, right?
There's no error handling, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm just saying, so it couldn't nest it. Possible. I just wanted to see. Okay, one more. Let's take a look. Gustavo was also kind enough. Gustavo, you want to walk us through your solution?
Yeah, so mine's not as pretty.
Doesn't have to be pretty.
Yeah. At its core, it's very similar. I use state to define stocks, which is the full list. Then I use the useEffect API and async and await to update the state. And then I have a child component called tickers, which passes the value of the state value of stocks. Now, I have some minor error handling here because it didn't work if I didn't add it. And that is because I'm using only one child component and using my map in here, and I'm not searching and I'm not passing only in most active stock, I tried to map through the list, but if you didn't get the full listing and there was no child component of most active stock, I got an error. So what you see here is I define my stocks, and then I go through and say, if I have stocks, then loop through the list and give me each ticker. Redefine my stocks as loop through the list and give me each ticker, then return my stocks. So if you go to the console here, you should see it saying my props are undefined, and then my props are and then the object defining here.
Okay. I see my props are object.
But what is inside that object, right? Stocks is undefined.
There you go.
And so here, the stocks is defined here. So the first time you call it, it renders, but it doesn't show every stock. So if, I don't know if you'd get an error if you show. I think you would still see the words most active stocks, but you would see nothing underneath it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Change the value here.
If I was to just add something there, oh no, it looks like it errors.
I wonder if that's because of the fetch statement errors.
Well, the error is like you cannot read property map of undefined.
Huh? I don't know why it.
Yeah, an error incurred in tickers. So you're still trying to pass something.
Is it because your initial state?
Yeah, with an empty array.
No, because that's what the secondary checks, right? Because it checks to see if, so it must be sending something to props. It just may not have my child component, right?
Yeah.
Because it must send like an error message, and that error message doesn't have a most active stocks component because I'm only looping through most active stocks. So I assumed that it would send me nothing, but apparently it gave me something.
Yeah, if I give in an empty array, still errors out my stock map.
Because it found props.stocks for some reason.
Yeah. Got it.
All right. Sorry. I should have tried harder. All right.
No. I don't think it's about trying harder. I think you did a great job in what you did. And what I really wanted to do also was, I think mostly the reason why I wanted to leave this open was to see how you would approach it and the challenges that you're going to face when it comes to designing your own thing, right? Like, what's your app going to look like? I don't know. How many components? I don't know yet. Where's state going to live? Don't really know that either. Like, being forced to answer those and then factor this, and then you might find later that this won't be sufficient if there's something else that gets updated, that even this might need to be refactored, and to see different iterations of it. So I think it's important for you to really work through a challenge like this so you're aware what it's going to be like when it comes time for your own project. Okay?
Oh, one other thing.
Yeah.
You can use useEffect multiple times inside as long as you provide a different parameter each time.
Oh,
so
sweet.
So I did have useEffect with an empty array and then useEffect with stocks feeding in, and it was called twice.
Got it.
So.
Okay. Yeah, the documentation that I've seen really calls it just one time. Everything that I've seen, but it's possible. I just haven't really seen it being used a lot.
It worked. It didn't break.
Oh yeah, I'm just, it may be not the best practice. Maybe it is. I think from what I've seen, it's just usually called once, but that's just, what I've seen. It could be another trend going on where you call it multiple times, but awesome. Sweet. I'll post some of those solutions in there so, you can have a reference to those. I'm not, it's 10:02, so I'm not going to go into it. But the final project, once again, the prompt's there. You can take a look at the previous projects, get an idea, look through their code, even to get a better idea of how they constructed it. And then from there, start thinking about your project. The homework was to do some reading and then convert the Films Lab into using hooks wherever. So if app is a class-based component, can I convert app into a functional component that uses state and uses effect? Can you do that? Right? You could just do it with app. Try giving your hand at converting this into that, which means a bit of refactoring. Okay, and then just post the solution inside of the spreadsheet. Cool. Awesome. Sweet. If you got time to do an exit ticket, awesome. You can leave me some feedback, help me out too. Not, I will see you on Tuesday. All right, everyone? Ciao.